Well, welcome everybody to Rise Up. Just to clarify, Rise Up is both a 7-week series where we are studying the book of Nehemiah, but it's also a capital campaign where we are following God with the prayer of raising $10 million over the next 2 years, and really excited about that. Mainly, we're so excited for all of you at South Naperville because the biggest part of this campaign is building you guys a brand new church building. Can I show you just a photo of what it's going to be like? This is the architect's rendition of the street side view. You know, we've been blessed by God with this prime lot right on the corner of Route 59 and 103rd. And with this incredible visibility to the community, the architect said, hey, let's build it with all the parking in the back so that all you see from the front is this beautiful little water retention pond. And, you know, the prayer would be the people would say, wow, look at this new church. We should check that out. It's amazing how much God uses drive-by. You know, we talk to people, maybe you are here because you drove by and said, hey, I need to check that out. Let's go to a cut from the inside. We have so many young people at our South Naperville campus. It's actually the highest amount of children and students percentage-wise in all of our churches, all of you at South Naperville. And so this whole half of the building is designed for children and young people, including a gymnasium that is going to be such a blessing to them. Here's the worship center that holds 600 seats. You know, those of us who aren't at South Naperville right now won't appreciate how much of a joy this will be. Our South Naperville campus is presently worshiping in what used to be a bank. Yes, banks don't design them to be converted into churches. So there's places where I can reach up and touch the ceiling in the worship center at South Naperville. And there are poles in the middle of it. You know, some of them right now are looking at me around obstructed view pole. And how glorious will it be to be in a room designed for worship. And the technology that we'll utilize, the video teaching, is going to be state-of-the-art design to communicate. And so we are just so excited how God is going to use it. I am pumped. Some of you are not as pumped. You're like, a capital campaign. I'm not even sure what I think of that, you know. And here, I want to tell you that capital campaigns in churches are, God's plan is that they would be sacred journeys. And when I mean sacred, I mean beloved and holy to God. God has used capital, our other 3 campuses, those of you at Bolingbrook, those of you at Wheaton and at Hobson, the rooms you're in are because of capital campaigns. Do you realize God has powerfully strengthened his church and made them effective in the use of building space through capital campaigns? That's how it happens. And sure enough, now we get to all work together to bring our one campus that's in a rented facility into their own building for the first time. But not only does it make the church better, capital campaigns make you better. At least that's my prayer for each one of us. Because it's a journey, a spiritual journey. Here's the challenge. Some of you are like, are you going to like arm twist, Jeff? No arm twisting, all right? Relax. The only arm twist is this: pray about it. That's all. The challenge is that everyone would go before God and genuinely say, hey, Lord, is this something you want me to be a part of? And if so, what were you thinking, Lord? What do you want me to commit to give over the next 2 years above and beyond my regular giving? And when you do that, if you've not done this before, let me just tell you, it is a beautiful journey with God. If you're married, you got to kind of also journey with God and your spouse, and say, what do we think about this? Some of you are intimidating me maritally because you're like, it's amazing, my wife and I, we just sat down and we were both thinking about the same number. What's wrong with my marriage? Because my wife and I are, talking about numbers and debating numbers, and I was ready to settle on a number, and Jen's like, I'm not done praying yet. And I'm like, oh, man. So our journey continues, but it's good. It's good for Jen and I. It's good for a marriage to talk about lifestyle and generosity and the will of God and total submission to his prompting and leadership. It's exciting when you feel like you've heard from God. Now, I'm mindful that when it comes to this kind of thing, this generosity thing, we all are in very different places. And I just want to say, no matter where you are regarding generosity, that's cool. We appreciate you being real and where you are. Some of you are like not much into generosity. You've not given away large quantities of money. In fact, you're bothered when churches talk about money. You prefer that churches just avoided this topic and we don't go there. You're like, man, it just seems creepy or whatever. Here's what I am praying for you. That you're surprised by your growing inclination to be a part of this. Maybe right now you're thinking, yeah, I ain't giving a dime, I'll tell you that right now. And then all of a sudden, as the series progresses, you start warming up to this lifestyle of generosity. And maybe your involvement in this campaign is putting your big toe in the water, if you will, testing what it's like to give. And I'm praying that you are testing the way of Jesus. You know, Jesus says, I came to give my life. He lives to give. That's what Jesus was all about. And as you test the way of Jesus, that you might find the life of Jesus welling up in your heart and say, that was beautiful. I'm going to do some more of that. Now, on the other extreme, there are people in our church that challenge me so profoundly in this area. I've talked with folks in our church who, only by my questioning will they finally release that they've been living their entire lives with a very simple lifestyle, precisely so they can maximize the amount of their life earnings, seeing it converted into kingdom-advancing, life-changing, gospel-preaching, soul-saving ministry. And I hear about them, and they're like, yeah, tithe 10%. We go way beyond that. And we do so joyfully. So they arrive at a capital campaign, and they're like, sweet, this is my home court, man. I got the spiritual gift of giving, and so, yeah, I'm all on, and you're excited to be here. Most maybe are somewhere in between those two. Wherever you are, my prayer is that through this 7-week journey, you meet with God, and you find yourself stretched in hearing from the Lord and loving his cause and his church more. And walk away going, that was good. That was good for my soul. And I'm praying it's a beautiful journey for us all. All right. That was like the sermon before the sermon. And so now let's get in, shall we, to Nehemiah. And I want to transition into Nehemiah by just mentioning my brother Dave. He is a pastor at our church as well. And it's weird how Dave and I are similar in many ways. I think brothers tend to be. Maybe it's that we both grew up with a dad. Our dad always drove trucks. So as it turns out, both Dave and I own four-wheel drive vehicles. Let me show you a picture here. This is Dave in his Jeep. It's me in my Toyota Tacoma. Both of our vehicles are made for off-roading. They've got souped-up suspension systems with oversized tires and lift kits that increase clearance. They're made for off-roading. And so, actually, if we zoom out on my brother here, you'll see he is actually off-roading in this picture. He's found a place recently that has off-roading tracks for these vehicles, and he's having a blast. He's invited me to join him many times, and I've said no every time. My preferred terrain is paved. Here's a zoom out on me, if you will. Yeah, this is how I roll in my pickup truck. And my brother mocks me, and maybe you do as well. And I suppose I'm worthy of the mockery. Here, my truck is designed to off-road, and I've never done it once. Been driving this thing 5 years. My truck's never touched gravel road. My truck, I go around speed bumps. I mean, it doesn't use what it's made for at all. And some would say, well, then that's a crime. Well, I don't think God cares about what terrain we drive in, but I know he cares about what terrain we live in. And what I mean by that, I want to use this as a little analogy to say that like my truck, You were made for off-road living. What I mean by that is you were made to get out of your comfort zone. You know, there's paved road living. It's where everything is safe and secure and nothing scares us and we just stay where we're comfortable. But if you're going to follow Jesus as Lord, a little warning, he's going to say, turn off the road. I've got an adventure for you. I'm going to call you into activity that advances my kingdom and scares you to death. God says that's where faith is born. That's where hearts beat. It's out of the comfort zone. And we're learning from Nehemiah, and we're about to see him veer. Nehemiah had it good, my friends. He was paved road, comfort zone living. And then he finds out, remember last week we discovered that Nehemiah found out that the people who have gone back to Jerusalem, which had been knocked down, God's holy city destroyed by the Babylonians, the people who have gone back, the Jews who had gone back, have been unable to rebuild the wall of the city. It's been 75 years, and still God's city is in shambles, his reputation disgraced as a result. And Nehemiah has been agonizing. He stayed in Persia, in the capital city, working for the king. But now he's agonizing, God, and what am I to do? Here's what you're to do. Follow the Lord. Off-roading, Nehemiah. Get out of the comfort zone. Let's take a look. We were in Nehemiah chapter 1. I want to start by reading the last verse of Nehemiah chapter 1. The last verse is verse 11. And it's the end of his prayer. He's been praying for months. And this is what he says. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. I was cupbearer to the king. Do you understand that prayer? When he says give your servant, he's referring to himself. Give me success today. Where in the presence of this man, can you guess who that is? It's his boss, King Artaxerxes, the most powerful man in the world. Artaxerxes is the king of the Persian Empire, so I'd make him the emperor. The empire is ruling the majority of the Mediterranean world at this time. And Nehemiah is praying, God, today's the day. I'm going before the king. And I'm going to make a request that's good. This request he's going to make before the king is turning off of the sweet life that he'd been enjoying and going off roading. When I say the sweet life, as the cupbearer, do you have any idea how luxurious his lifestyle was? You see, the king had a court, and the cupbearer was part of the court. The court were invited to live in the palace and partake of the lifestyle of the king, or at least some of it. And so Nehemiah was living in the greatest house on planet Earth. The Persian emperors had a reputation for building palaces beyond historic reputation. In fact, some of the grandeur of the house Nehemiah lived in can be seen here in Chicago. If you go to the University of Chicago and you go to their museum called the Oriental Institute, you'll see this bull. Look at this. I took this picture. This is a granite bull's head that decorated the throne room of the king in the house that Nehemiah lived in. This is a different museum, but you see a little more of how the bull's heads were used here. This is the top of a pillar that would hold these huge beams that held the ceiling up, and there would be hundreds of pillars capped like this. Is your crown molding decor in your house kind of like that, huh? Wow. Friends, we're talking swimming pools, hot tubs, saunas. We're talking food, the best food in the world with the best chefs in the world. Nehemiah, do you know I discovered that the Persians were the ones who pioneered refrigeration. They invented this thing called a yakel. A yakel was an underground refrigeration chamber, like a room, that used the insulation of the earth and packed ice in the winter around the edge of this vault. And even in the heat of summer, they'd have cooled beverages and refrigerated meats and foods. They had it good. Nehemiah would hear the finest musicians and the best theater. He was living a charmed life. And yet on this day, when he says, yeah, I'm out of here. Boss, can I go? He was going to be living in a tent. Friends, he was giving up comfort. In fact, in the next slide here, you'll see the word discomfort. What I mean by that is that if you're going to follow God off-roading, there's some discomfort. You're going to say no to some comforts. So many of us are passionately devoted to a comfortable life. We do everything we can to make everything comfortable. Well, the people who follow Jesus have to say goodbye to that devotion. Some comforts the Lord will bring, but it's not all about my comfort anymore. I'm going to give you an example and brag on my father. My dad retired 10 years ago, and retirement can be all about comfort. You know, you can say, hey, I had to work for so long. Now it's all about me. For the rest of my life, I do things I enjoy. And my dad is like, I'm going to do some things I enjoy. And I think it's right to enjoy retirement. But if it becomes all about us, I don't think that expresses the will of God. My dad has said, how can I step out of what do I enjoy, what comforts are for me, and how can I bring comfort to others? And here's a picture of a team of volunteers. This is my dad here in the middle. And he found in his town this neurobalance center. They provide physical therapy to people with debilitating diseases, MS and Parkinson's. It's a bus or shuttle van that's equipped with a lift for wheelchairs. And my dad, as a volunteer, drives this van and picks up people and takes them to physical therapy. But more than drive, my dad, though a business guy his whole life, he's like a pastor to his passengers. He loves on them and tells stories from his own life and hears stories from their lives. My dad and mom are bringing folks to their home for dinner. And I am so proud. 10 years he's been doing this. And why? Because it's not all about his comfort. Maybe he can bring some comfort to others. And friends, that's part of what being on this off-roading adventure for the Lord is. Lord, if I'm giving up comfort, so be it. But let's move on. The next thing I'd like to point out is not only is there discomfort, there's also risk. Risk. Well, you start to see the risk in the next verse 1 of chapter 2. It's chapter division, but there's no break in the story. It just continues to flow. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought to him, I took wine and gave it to the king. I simply want to point out that this is the month of Nisan, which is our April, okay? Yet if you go back to the first verse in verse 1, we find out that he heard the bad news about Jerusalem in the month of Kislev, which is December. So December to April is 4 months. Nehemiah has been agonizing and weeping and mourning and praying over this problem for 4 months. And now he's come to a place where he says, today, this is it. I'm going to my boss. Okay, why is that important? Look at the next verse, verse 2. Nehemiah continues, I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you're not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. And Nehemiah adds, I was very much afraid. Okay, what's going on here? We know that he's been grieving for 4 months, and yet on this day, it's the first time he's let it show. So that tells us that for 4 months, he's been hiding his emotion. Before he goes into his boss and serves the king, he's been wiping his eyes and saying, I got to get a smile on my face. I can't let him know how I'm feeling. And now on this day that he's choosing to let it be known that he's really sad, he's scared to death. Why is he afraid? I'll tell you why. It was illegal to be sad in the presence of the emperor. Nobody can rain on his party, essentially. Everybody must be happy all the time when around the emperor so as to not dampen his own spirits. It's interesting. Archaeologists, when excavating the palaces of the kings of Persia, have come across a number of walls that are engraved. And look at this. This dates back to the days of Nehemiah and King Artaxerxes. And this is a picture of the king of Persia and somebody appearing before him. And do you notice that the hand is covering the mouth? This is on a lot of engravings, and scholars have said, why are they always covering their face? And one of the theories is it's this whole thing where you can be killed if he sees a sad face, a mellow face, an angry face. And so one of the theories is, man, before the king, you better cover your face or be lit up with smile or you're toast. And so here Nehemiah, when he chooses to I'm going to weep openly in front of the king, he's putting his neck out there, taking a huge risk. And friends, when you're off-roading, not crazy risk, but God's going to call you to calculated risks. I mean, just financially. If you say, Lord, I'm going to give some money. Some could think that that's a risk. Because if you spend all your money on me, if you save it all, and it's like a warm blanket around you when you go to bed, oh, my money, that's comfort. When you give some away, you're not as safe. So we think, actually, when you're in the arms of God, you're as safe as can be. But God calls us to calculate a risk. When you do evangelism and tell people about how Christ is changing your life, you're risking relationships. When you say yes to volunteering, you could be risking your time. I don't know what I'm getting into. Could this mushroom into more than I asked for? In the biblical days, they risked their safety, like Nehemiah. But friends, if you can't identify with risk, you're on paved comfort zone living. Because God wants his people to be taking calculated, faith-filled, spirit-led risks. It's part of off-road living. Next slide. Discomfort, giving up some comforts. God will call you to that. God will call you to risks, and it'll demand courage. Look at this verse. This is a beautiful verse about courage. Nehemiah says, the king was like, dude, are you sadness of heart? Nehemiah, he says, I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins? Wow. What I love about this is it says, I was very much afraid, but I answered the king. Some people think that courage is the absence of fear. I prefer the definition that says courage is obedience to God even in the face of fear. That's what Nehemiah is doing. He's like, whoo, here goes nothing. All right, Lord. And his heart is pounding, and he feels the fear. And I answered the king. My city is in ruins. Friends, if you don't feel that rush of adrenaline, of fear, because you're way out of your comfort zone, you're not following God. Because the Lord doesn't lead people to stay in paved road, safe living. He calls us out to the land where we are going to be in faith, relying on him, trusting in him outside of our comfort zone. It's going to demand courage. This courage to obey in the face of fear is something we should all be identifying with if we're really following Jesus. So, there we've got a picture of what off-road living looks like. We're going to be led to give up comfort, led to take calculated risks, led in acts that demand courage. And so Nehemiah tells him, I'll tell you why I'm sad. It's because of this city. Look at how the king responds. Verse 4. The king said to me, what is it you want? Doesn't this sound like a parent speaking to their teenager? You just wash the dishes? What do you want? And that's exactly the question Nehemiah was hoping the king would ask him. All right, so you're all bummed out about your capital city, the city of God, being in ruins. Why are you telling me this? What do you want? And Nehemiah boldly asks for three things. The first was time off. Verse 4, Nehemiah says, "Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it." King, I've been serving you, but I'm asking, send me away from serving you so I can devote myself to something other than you. This is a dangerous request. Do you see that? Hey, look what the king responds. The king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, "How long will your journey take? And when will you get back?" Translated, how many days off are you asking for? And Nehemiah adds, "It pleased the king to send me, and so I set a time." The king said yes to his request for time off to do this great thing. The next request, as long as he's getting a yes, he goes for broke here. He asks for protection. In verse 7, Nehemiah says, "I also said to the king, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah." He's asking for a hall pass. To move from one part of the ancient world to the other was a dangerous thing. You were going through enemy territory, and they could say, "Why are you here?" Put him in jail. But he's asking for a pass, a letter of safe conduct that says, "The emperor has said Nehemiah can go through your land." Okay? And what's next? He's like, let's go for broke here. And he asks for supplies, construction supplies. Verse 8. "And, king, may I have a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the royal park," that is forest, park, "so that he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple and for the city wall." Wow, construction supplies he's asking for. And how will this emperor respond? Verse 8 continues, "And because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my requests." He won. He risked his life. Not only did he get everything he asked for, he got more than he asked for. Verse 9, "The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me." The king sent an escort of military to make sure he got to Jerusalem safely. Friends, Nehemiah at this stage is so glad that he veered off of his sweet life, paved road life, to follow God into off-roading. And you will be too. The benefits of off-roading are great. Can I show some benefits from what we just read? I kind of skimmed over some things that I now want to draw your attention to, because I see three benefits that are really important for us to see. In fact, I'll go back now to the first verse we read, Nehemiah 1:11, and I'll call it significance. Remember in the prayer, he said, give me success. Now, is he praying for business success, for his own ambition? No. This is a God project he's praying for success on. Now, there's nothing wrong for praying for your own business and your own success. That's great. But the greatest success to pray for is, God, as I follow you on these adventures that you're calling me to contribute to your eternal cause, give me success in those. Because divine project success is significant eternally. And Nehemiah, when he got success at his deathbed and he looked at the glory of Jerusalem with the wall around it, Nehemiah was like, yes, I've had success in the Lord's work. And friends, you want at the end of your life to look back and to see those things where you're like, Lord, you gave me success in eternally significant ventures. Here's another one. Connection. And by connection, I mean connection to God. There is a connection to God that people off-roading enjoy that those on the comfort zone, paved road living never touch. And I see this, remember we read this already. The king said to Nehemiah, "What is it you want?" I don't know if you caught this. Nehemiah says, "Then I prayed to the God of heaven and answered the king." This is one of those prayers where you're like, all right, here goes nothing, Lord. I'm about to say something that could end my life. You better be with me, Lord, because if you're not, I'm toast. If you ever, before you went into your boss's office or before you had that conversation, you're just like, oh, dear God, help me. There is a desperate connection to God that those who are way off on off-road, faith-filled living, they cling to the Lord like a little child clinging to dad's hand. And those who are, I'm not saying you can't pray in comfort zone living. You can, but it's nothing like the vital dependence that occurs on those who are way out there trusting the Lord. Here's one more, and that is intervention, divine intervention. The people who say, wow, did you see what happened? That's God showing up. It's either a miracle or God providentially working. You know who sees God show up? Those who follow him off-roading. That's who. And look what Nehemiah said. After giving all of his requests, his 3 requests, he said, "And because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my requests." Does he give credit to Artaxerxes and say, oh, because the king is just so generous and warm-hearted? He may even like Artaxerxes, but he knows what's up here. This is a God thing. God is influencing the heart and the mind of Artaxerxes and leading him to this yes, 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 and more. And friends, it's so fun when you realize, woohoo, did you see that? That was God showing up. Friends, you can't see God show up if you're devoted to just keeping it all safe. It's out there in obedience, faith-filled obedience. Like my dad. So my dad says my retirement's not all about me. I think God's prompting me to work as a volunteer, driving these people around, loving on these people. My dad called me 2 days ago and he said, "Jeff, can I just tell you?" He's like, "Don." He goes, "Don has never gone to church except for weddings and funerals he was forced to go to. Don has never gone to church." My dad says, "I've been driving him for 3 years. We've become tight friends." And Don just called me and said, "My wife and I have been talking about it, and we'd like to join you and your wife at church this weekend. Would you take us?" And so right now, my mom and dad are at church with Don and his wife who have never been. My dad's like, "Jeff, that's a God thing." And I'm like, "You're right, that is a God thing. It's divine intervention. It's what you experience when you follow him out of your comfort zone and go off-roading. I would use this capital campaign as an example. If you decide to get in and say, all right, this is not comfortable, I'm a little nervous, I'm risking finances a little bit, we're going to get this building built, and you're going to look at this beautiful church that's going to minister to people with the gospel of Jesus Christ long after we're gone, and you're going to say, I was a part of that. Maybe big, maybe small, but essential part of it. I was part of what made that happen, and I thank God for the eternally significant task we were called to and we accomplished with his strength. Connection. I already mentioned this, that in this campaign, we are to turn to God and say, Lord, I need you. Please show up, show up. Tell me, God, speak to me. And when you realize that God is nudging you and that you're getting a number that you should commit over 2 years, and you realize, I think this is the will of God. Oh, friends, the connection between you and God in this is so fun. And then intervention. Lord willing, we're going to, in December, announce what the grand total is. And Lord willing, my prayer is we're going to say, wow, that was a God thing. You see what God did in a bunch of people living in a materialistic society? God showed up, and those of us in it are just going to feel it and know it, that we've been part of a move of God. Friends, it's a better way to live. I got a friend who works at an auto shop, and he let me borrow, which way does it go? I think it goes this way. This is a shock absorber spring system. This is the exact one in my truck. It's performance. It's beefed up for, boom, boom, taking this exciting adventure off-roading. Mine has never squeaked. It's quite possible that I'm going to drive this truck for 15 years. It'll eventually end up in a junkyard, and it will have never squeaked and used its potential at all. And you say, that's sad. That's not that sad. But what is sad is this. This is in you. You were made by God for the adventure of off-road living. You were made by God to feel the heart-pounding adrenaline of following him out of your comfort zone, of trusting in him, of obeying him, of having faith in him, of depending on him, of feeling his strength come up and his victory manifest. And you know what would be a real shame? Is for you to arrive at the end of our lives with this potential never being actualized. It never squeaking. Friends, we were made for the adventure of following the Lord. It's not too late. We're all alive. We've got life ahead. Let's turn off the road and let's follow him. Would you pray with me? God, it's one life. And sometimes we find our devotion, God, to this comfort zone. It's all about me. Got to protect me and my time and my money and my stuff. And God, we don't want to do that. We don't want to arrive at the end realizing that it was all about us. Give us the faith of Nehemiah. God, let us hear your call and Rise Up initiative and in all the unique ways you want to use our lives. Lead us and give us the courage to turn off the road, to follow you, to feel the heart pounding. God, we want to sense that exhilaration. We want to cry out to you as Nehemiah did and say, here goes nothing, Lord, let's do this thing. We want to take that faith-filled, God-guided risks in life. We want to feel the significance. And so here we go. Give us courage. Make us brave. Help us trust your love. Help us follow you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.